because I did more econometrics focused courses. Um, so I ended up not doing a behavioral economics course. I actually considered, well, yeah, obviously when I was doing economics and psychology, I figured behavioral economics was the my goal because it's like, that's like the points of the triangle. Um, I still think, just like psychology, I think would be an interesting thing to learn about and to engage with on my own free time. But I don't. I'm not really thinking about that now.
Mhm. I will put that as a public recommendation. Everyone should go and read Freakonomics. Amazing book, really amazing book, and it talks about um, the correlations between normal things, and it's economics explained in a really simple way that can be applied to more subjects, to a greater perspective on life. So I would recommend anyone checks out Freakonomics. But where do you feel? So I'll ask you on the podcast, macro, micro.
um, Definitely without question macro. Okay, I can question like 1%, but I've taken micro courses that made me really question me doing an economics degree, and then after that I took a macro course, and I was like, okay, this seems like I could like breathe a little bit more in that course, right? Because it's not just uh, production functions and Greek letters and math. It was like actual connections to real life things. I took a course with Julian Karagasian, great prof, on international. Well, the title of the course was International Finance, I think, but really it was just international macro, and it went into like exchange rates, um, uh, interest rates, and stuff like that. It's really like economics between countries, right? And I thought that was really interesting. So that might be something that I would be interested in exploring in terms of my future. Definitely macro.
So can you explain the
Uh,
difference between macro and micro?
oh yeah, I could do that for sure. I mean, as the names suggest, microeconomics, you're sort of taking a magnifying glass and looking at a within firm process, right? I mean, for example, you have. I mean, the simple idea of scarcity in economics, or like, how to allocate resources in an efficient way, right? Efficiency versus equity. These are all questions that you examine and you try to answer in microeconomics. So you would probably look at a firm, look at their production function, look at the resources that they have, look at what they want to do with that resource, and figure out how to allocate those resources given a specific constraint, like workers that you have, or wages that you have to pay to workers, or resources that you have, or even in the situation in the geography that you're in, are is it feasible to allocate this this much resources to trying to pull water from this lake, where there could be a better way, or should you be spending this much money, or on this position, or like how much should I pay my workers? How much should I pay my workers, or how many workers should I have for this amount of wage? These are all like microeconomic stuff, right? But for macroeconomics, is you're zooming out and you think about, for example, international trade. So I think that's part of macroeconomics too. Tariffs and trade, or taxes. How much tax should you put on cigarettes, for example, or how much tariffs should you put on for against this country? You learn about a lot about U.S. and China relate. You could learn a lot about U.S. China relations economically. You could learn about Germany and its role in Greece going bankrupt, in the EU. I mean, even the EU itself is an interesting case. This whole like monetary unions and things like that. So it's pretty different micro and macro, I'd say. And that's also like the international development side of economics that I think is kind of tied to. It could be related to micro, it could be related to macro. It's a little different, I'd say. It's also, I guess, it's like another branch of economics.
Yeah, 100%. The both sides are very interesting to me, and both sides have their things. I couldn't tell you which I prefer, but what did you always feel that way about macro? Like that was always what interested you more, or that started to develop more when you started doing your course?
Yeah, so I started learning about economics in 2018, right, for my IB course, and the usual progression of or the usual way economics is structured in high school is that you have about four different parts. You have the first one being micro, then macro, and then some, I guess, trade and development. Um, and also it always starts off very dry for me because we had to slug through the micro portion. I mean, it's important stuff to know, and for sure, because you learn about basic economic concepts. But I've always felt more interested when we got to the macro part, and that's where I could really link what I know to things in real life. And then when I took a international development course earlier this year, my final semester, that was when I was like, oh, actually, developmental economics is actually interesting, and it might be something that I would want to explore further. Because previously, before that, it had just been micro and macro for me,
Mhm.
and I would just lump trade into macro. I know it's not exactly the same thing, but for me, it's more similar. Yeah.
So, if you could do anything with your knowledge of economics, what would you focus on? What is it that really interests you? What did you do your thesis on, for example?
Oh, I didn't have to do a thesis,
Okay.
thankfully. Um, well, okay, there are two aspects, right, to this question about like my future, my career. Is that like one side is where the money is, and the other side is like what do I actually want to do in the world? And I think if I think about the part about uh doing something useful in the world, it will definitely be developmental economics. Um, because I just think there's just so much that can be done in so many places that you could do good work in. Obviously, it tends to be developmenting countries. What did I just? I don't know what I just said. Developing countries. That's also what we focus most on in our course. I don't think I'm honestly that interested in doing developmental economics in developed countries. Of course, there's work that you could do there, but I'm more interested in the things that you could do elsewhere in the world. Because I think you could just make people's lives so much better. And this is kind of what we study, why we study is because you learn things to make the world a better place. At least that's why I do it. Um, and that's where I would like to explore being able to use my knowledge. And on the other side, if you think about money and where the money is, I think definitely the finance side of it, especially now, with all the training that's going on, or even AI. AI's in the past, what, 1 2 years, I think it's really shaken a lot of things up. It's shaken the entire ground, and now we're getting all sorts of articles, posts about how fast AI is developing. Um, and I feel like that it could change the economic field in a lot of ways. I mean, it changes everything, but
Mhm.
talking about economics right now. And I assume that it would change the financial economic field a lot as well. I don't quite know how, but yeah.